Hello students, welcome to my third session of online classes. As I have observed, you have gone through the first two sessions and hope that you have understood what I have taught there in those two sessions. I expect the same interest, the same curiosity in you till the end. But at the same time, I hope for your early return to the real classrooms face to face, because the colleges, the classrooms have worn a kind of a deserted look in your absence. They are so charmless, they are so lifeless. So what I expect is, not just me, all of us, the teachers, expect you to come to the real classrooms very soon. Let this pandemic end, the pandemic crisis end very soon, and let us meet in the real classrooms. Till then, let us continue with this online series of classes. In my today's class, I would like to take up one more unit of your course book, of your textbook, and this time it is a poem, that is The Schoolboy by William Blake, an English poet belonging to 18th century, 1757 to 1827. A poet, painter, engraver, printmaker, all in one, a multi-talented personality. And unlike the first writer, Jomo Kenyatta, this man is quite known to you. See, some of you are from CBSE board, some of you are from ICSE, some are from state board. In that also some have studied English as a first language, some as a second language. But somewhere in your previous classes, you must have heard of this man. Let me recall your memories. That is, for example, The Chimney Sweeper, wherein the poet narrates the sad plight of a child labor who loses his mother and who is employed as a chimney sweeper. And it has a very famous line which says that if all of us do our duty, there is no fear of any harm. So very good moral is conveyed towards the end of this poem. And this Chimney Sweeper is a very popular poem in the anthologies of poems prescribed for study. Let me give one more example, The Poison Tree, wherein we have a very oft quoted line, I was angry with my friend, I told my wrath, and the wrath did end. I was angry with my friend, I told it not, and the wrath did grow. So these are the two of the famous poems which we find a place in one or the other anthologies, and wherein you are introduced with this man, that is William Blake. Even some of his quotes also are very famous, where mercy, pity and love dwells, there the God is dwelling too. Or the bird which soars too, or no bird can soar too high if it soars with his own wings. Very simple quotes, but have a very weighty moral, because the poet himself was a mystic. He was a kind of a prophet towards the end of his life. In the last years of his life, he was kind of a mystic. So we kind of very lines with the weighty morals in his words. So these are those with which you are quite acquainted. So this is what I would like to recall your memory, to tell you who this Blake is. And here in this poem, the poet has taken up your issue, not a subject which is confined only to Blake. As you go through the poem, you will come to know that the poet is speaking about us. because whatever he narrates, it is related to you. And even though he has spoken it in that 18th century, it is relevant even today in a better way than in those days. Today, when the formal education has become a dire necessity, so the words of Blake are more relevant today. Now, if you want to learn this poem or why the poet has written in that way, if you want to know the purpose, then it is better to know something about his personality, maybe as a poet, as an individual, as a human being. So, that will help us for the better understanding of this poet. So, as I told you, he was a poet, printer and a painter as well as engraver. But unfortunately, he did not get the recognition he deserved during his lifetime. Today we consider him one among the pre-romantics along with Burns. Robert Burns and William Blake are considered to be the pre-romantics in English literature, and who paved the way for the real romantic movement, which was to begin in the 19th century with the publication of the book you might have heard, that is the lyrical ballads. And Wordsworth, Coleridge, Southey, Scott are the real beginners of this movement, and Shelley, Keats and Byron are the successors, the younger generation of romantics. So Blake is not completely a romantic poet, but the traits of romanticism are found in this poet, and now he has established his place in the English literature as one of the greatest pre-romantic poets. But during his lifetime, he did not enjoy any recognition. It is better to say maybe till 1860, when Alexander Gilchrist published his biography, till that period he was totally unknown to the outside world. And after its republication in 1880 by D.G. Rossetti, he became even more famous, and now today in the modern world he is recognized to be one of the model, a very seminal figure who is a model both in art and literature. And William Rossetti calls him as the unparalleled figure who had no successors, who had no predecessors or contemporaries with whom he can be classed or with whom he can be compared with. Even the 2002 survey, BBC survey, which has taken up some 100 members for study. So in that list also he is placed on the 38th position. So that only shows what kind of popularity this William Blake is enjoying today. Then why he failed to acquire or get the recognition during his lifetime? Why he was sometimes called as a madman or eccentric? So there are two reasons. One is his nature. He was a bit eccentric, a whimsical kind of a character he was. And second reason maybe is that he was less educated. He received the formal education only till the age of 10. That's all. That is the end of his formal education. At the age of 10, he was withdrawn from the school, and his mother decided to educate him at home. Then what he did then after the 10 years of age, he was first enrolled in a drawing school. So for some 3 or 4 years he received the training at the drawing school. Then after 14 years, so maybe around 15 years, he joined or he was apprenticed to a famous engraver, and that training of engraving he received for 7 years, and when he came out from there at the age of 21, he established himself as a professional engraver. Now, what is the necessity for me to tell you all these things is, now you will fully realize why This poet, William Blake, has so much of hatred for the formal schooling. Why he finds so much of a suffocating atmosphere inside the classroom. So only when you know about him, only about you study his track record, then you will realize why the poet has a kind of a disgust for the school education or the formal education, which all of us, you, me, we stress for in our day-to-day life. We today have reached such a state that we can't imagine a life without the formal education, or an illiterate person is considered to be like an uncivilized person. So to that extent we are stressing this formal education. Now in this poem, in the first part, the poet narrates what he would like to do if he does not want to go to school. In the second part, or in the next stanza, he lists up what are the traumatic experiences of him in the classroom. Then he compares his state to different things, and finally he compares he takes the two cycles of nature and human life, and then narrates his case and makes an attempt to plead his parents to take him away from the school. Now what he is saying in the poem, we shall go through with the poem first. Let me read the poem first, and then let me stress the points where I would like to stress, or which I feel that you will need the explanation. So let me first read the poem. The schoolboy. I love to rise in a summer morn when the birds sing on every tree. The distant huntsman winds his horn and the skylark sings with me. Oh, what a sweet company! But to go to school in a summer morn, oh, it drives all joy away. Under a cruel eye outworn, the little ones spend the day in sighing and dismay. Oh, then at times I drooping sit and spend many an anxious hour, nor in my book can I take delight, nor sit in learning's bower, worn through with the dreary shower. How can a bird that is born for joy sit in a cage and sing? How can a child when fears annoy but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? Oh, father and mother, if buds are nipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care's dismay, how shall the summer arise in joy? Or or the summer fruits appear? Or how shall we gather what grapes destroy or bless the mellowing year when the blasts of winter appear? So, in the simple words, we find the agony of the boy, the grief of the boy that he has undergone in his school days or in the captivity of a classroom. So, in the beginning, in the first stanza, the poet, through the mouth of the little boy, who represents all of you. Some of you might get identified with this boy as I go on explaining the experiences of this boy, because what the boy feels in the classroom, many of you have undergone this kind of a experience in your school days or maybe in your college days. So in the first stanza, the boy says, I love to rise in a summer morn when the birds sing on every tree and the distant huntsman winds his horn. I would like to sing with the skylark. And all this is such a sweet company. What the poet what the boy meant by this. I want to rise in a summer morn. So it stresses the fact that if he is enrolled in a school, the school discipline would demand that he should get up early in the morning before the daybreak, before the sun rays have reached the earth. So when still it is darkness, so then he has to get up, get ready for the school, and he does not have the leisurely morning. So that the boy does not want. That is why he says, I want to rise in the summer morn when the bright rays of sun have already reached the earth. So late in the morning I would like to get up, and on getting up I would like to occupy myself, or I would like to be busy with the listening to the music that is available in the nature. I would like to listen to the birds singing in every day. A variety of birds would be singing in the different trees, and I would like to enjoy that singing of those birds, the melodious songs of those birds. And sometimes I may even would like to join my voice with the sound of the skylark. And I would also like to listen to the huntsman who would be winding his horn. What it refers to, what the huntman's winding his horn refer to. You city people may not be quite aware of this fact, but those who are from the rural areas or from the hilly or forest regions, you know this fact. So at the fall of the night, though now it is against the law, okay, the hunting is not allowed now, it is prohibited now, but still in the hilly regions, in the forest regions, there is a tradition that at the day fall, or at the fall of the night, at the dusk period, the hunters, they walk towards the direction of the forest, they move in the band, and on reaching the deep forest they scatter here and there, or they settle on different shelters they have already created for them, maybe on the trees or in the cave like areas of the rocks. So somewhere they keep hiding, and they do the hunting at the night time, and early in the morning when the sun rays arrive on the earth, and in that broad daylight, the leader of the gang, he blows the horn and he gives a message to all his companions, all his friends to gather, so that they can move towards the village, because it is not advisable for any person to move alone in the forest. There is a danger of wild animals at any time being attacked. So in that case they move in the gang while going to the forest and while returning from the forest also. So here the little boy says, I would like to listen to that huntsman who winds his horns for calling his comrades, for calling his companions. So all this joy will not be available for me if I go to school. See, if I go to school, I will be busy making myself ready for the school, packing my bag, getting ready, and all those activities I will be busy, and I don't want all those things. I want to enjoy these happenings in the nature, and these are a pure joy for me. So all these are such a sweet company for me. I think I need not explain this stanza more for you, because you had passed through a long lockdown when the whole world was locked down, and the only sound we could hear during those period was the chirping of the birds, or some of the sounds of the animals. So no movement of the vehicles, no sound of the vehicle horns, and the only sound available for us during that period was the sounds from the nature. Even you might have come across a variety of birds, if at all you have any garden around your house. So during this lockdown period, now also the birds are there, they are singing to themselves. Maybe the degree may vary, they may not be available, the birds may not be available in the nature to that extent as we had found during the lockdown, but still they are there. But your ears are not that attentive. As Wordsworth says, we have eyes but we can't hear, we have the ears but we can't hear from them, because we are busy getting and spending. In word is in the poem, the world is too much with us. Wordsworth says, getting and spending, we lay waste our power, little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away to a sordid boon. The sordid boon is for this craze for materialism. So you the you kids, you are not that way, you are not won by the materialism so far, but yet you have no time because you are busy with your this school activities, project, writing, reading and such activities, so you have no time. But the boy says, I am adapted to this kind of a natural life and I would like to listen to it even in the future days also. So all this is a sweet company. Please don't deprive me away from the from this kind of a sweet life. And this is not the only reason the boy gives. He gives the second reason why I hate the school, why I can't bear the sight of the school, why it makes me so disgusting. In the second stanza, he describes the atmosphere of the school life. But to go to school in a summer morn, oh, it drives all joy away. What it means? The very thought of the school, the very thought that I have to attend a school, so that makes me it almost drives away all the joy, the spirits in me, the very thought of the school, so it kills my spirits and I can't stand it. So, and moreover, in the school what I find, under a cruel eye outworn, the little ones spend this day in sighing and dismay. So here you would like to know more about what is the cruel eye outworn and sighing and dismay. So these are some of the words the boy uses to explain the atmosphere of a school or the classroom. So he says, the very thought of going to school drives away all the joy. It kills the spirit in me. It kills the enthusiasm in me. So I can't enjoy the whole day when the thought of school comes to my mind. Because in the school we have to sit in front of the cruel eye outworn. What this cruel eye outworn means, I think no one can know better than you about this term. So when you are sitting in the classroom for a while, when you feel bit bored or if you feel not interested in the class, you just make an attempt to go out of the window, or you attempt to pass some message to your friends, and at that time what response you get from your teachers is the cruel eye outworn. So the teacher directly asks you, what's the matter? Why can't you give attention to the class? What is wrong with you? Why can't you listen to the explanation? Keep quiet. Don't move away. So these are the directions we the teachers give the students whenever we find the teacher bit unattentive in the classroom. So this attitude of the teachers, do or do nots, don't do like this, do this way, behave as I expect you to behave in the classroom. So this kind of an undemocratic atmosphere we can say. This undemocratic atmosphere, over discipline of the teachers, the authoritative the attitude of the teachers, so all this the boy calls as a cruel eye outworn. ಸಿಡುಕಿನಿಂದ ನೋಡುವಂಥ ಆ ಟೀಚರ್ಸ್ನ ಕಣ್ಣುಗಳಿದ್ದಾವಲ್ಲ, ಸೊ ಅವು ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತವೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಅವನ್ನು ನೆನೆಸ್ಕೊಂಡಾಗ ಅಯ್ಯೋ ಬೇಡಪ್ಪ ಸ್ಕೂಲು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ತದೆ. And moreover, when we are forced to stay there for hours together, for day together, so what we do or how we spend the time? We spend the time sighing and dismay. Sigh meaning take a deep breath, ನಿಟ್ಟುಸಿರು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. But here sighing refers to, I give you one example, you will know it accurately. See, one teacher is teaching you the class, and when you feel bored, maybe because of your ill health, maybe because of lack of your interest in that particular class, you are waiting for the time to pass, and when the teacher moves away from the class, you take or you heave a sigh of relief. Abba hodrappa. So this is what the boy meant by sighing. Then dismay means unexpected distress. So you are enjoying a leisure for a while and suddenly there appear another character, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪಾತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಹಾಜರಾಗ್ಬಿಡ್ತದೆ. Then what you feel is, oh no, So your mind is not receptive, it is not in willing to receive one more teacher into the class, but the teacher is already entered, and then you look at that teacher in a dismayed kind of a thing. So this is how the boy spends the time in the school. So in sighing and dismay, the boy spends the time in the school. Oh, then at times I drooping sit and spend many an anxious hour. So one more word he uses, drooping sit. Then at times drooping I sit and spend many an anxious hours. So what is meant by drooping? This is also very familiar thing, a familiar word to be used for the many of the students. See, when you feel, when you are sitting in the third or the fourth period continuously, when the classes are going on continuously, and when you are in the fourth or fifth period, your mind is not receptive, you are saturated with the thing learning, and you are waiting for the time to go home, and then your posture will be either you will be propping on the desk, the front desk, or you will be leaning back on the bench, or maybe leaning on the window. So all these postures are called drooping postures, means not in an attentive position. So the boy says, I spend the time in a drooping position, means I am not interested, I am not attentive at all, just I am passing away the time there in the classroom, and as such the time in the classroom, so it is kind of an anxious hour for me. What is meant by anxious hour here? Usually the word anxiety or anxiousness is related to the adults like us, because we have thousands of worries in our head, thousands of responsibilities on our shoulders, and we may have the anxiety. But what anxiety a child, a school going boy can have? Yes. So the boys or the kids also have their own anxieties, and the poet, the school boy here refers to those anxieties which the kids encounter or they face in the classroom. Now take for example, he is sitting in a drooping posture, leaning to a window or leaning on the back of his friend. So there are every chance that he may be caught by the teacher at any time, or he may be asked some question by the teacher on the topic the teacher is dealing with, and in which the boy is least interested and nothing of it has entered into the boy's head. And if in such case, if the question is put to the boy, then he will either he will have to answer, or he will have to face a kind of an embarrassment in the class among all the other companions. So he has that kind of an anxiety, or he may have the anxiety that would this teacher give one more homework? So far some 3 or 4 teachers have given me the homework. Would this teacher be giving one more homework? So would there be another addition to the work to be done at home? So maybe that kind of anxiety. So anyhow the boy is filled with a kind of an anxiety. So he spends the time in the school in a kind of an anxiety. So he refers to the period spent in the school as the anxious hours, not the happy hours, not the pleasureful hours. So but the anxious hours are very stressful hours. To give you the best example, if any one of you have watched a film that is Tare Zameen Par, in which the major role is played by Aamir Khan, and there we find a small boy, Ishan, if I am not mistaken, and that boy, when he was forced into the discipline of the school, and when once he was asked by the teacher constantly to read one particular page of the book, the boy, who is quite unable to identify the letter, he bursts out shouting something nonsense. So this is the state of our schoolboy too in the classroom, when he is forced to sit there in the classes, when he is forced to listen to the lectures which does not enter into his head. So this is the state of the boy is. So he passes that anxious hours, and then he says, nor in my book can I take delight. So just to avoid the eye contact with the teacher, if the boy looks at the teacher, the chances are there the teacher may ask him some question. So to avoid the eye contact with the teacher, what the boy does is he tries to involve himself in, he makes a pretense of reading into the book. But he says, even the books also cannot delight me. They cannot give me any delight. I don't find any delight. If there were some pleasant pictures to observe, if there were some pleasant ideas to read, then I might have enjoyed at least the books, and anyhow I have rolled on, or I have passed on those class period, or the duration of the school. But that is also not available. The schools, or the books also cannot delight me, nor sit in a learning's bower worn through with the dreary shower. So now why the poet uses the word bower here? So he calls the school as learning bower. If you search for the meaning of bower in a dictionary, you will find that it is a shade created by the branches or the twigs of a tree. Now why the boy refers to the school as a learning bower? So it is not a place, a shady place that we find in the nature. So it is a concrete building built with the lime, cement or stone or something else. So, but the poet, for two reasons, as I feel, he uses this word bower for the school building. One is that being involved in the nature, in his mind, he imagines that the place where he is sitting is under a bower in the nature. Maybe this one reason, or because he has developed so much of disgust towards the school, the school building appears like a dilapidated building, walls of which are grown with the full greenery, the weeds, the green small plants over the surface of that bower. So maybe because of that, the poet feels that the school is nothing like a bower, but the only difference between the other bowers and this school building is that it is a learning bower. The bower not meant for the birds and other such creatures of nature, but meant for the kids like me who are made to sit here. So that is why it is a learning bower, and that learning bower is worn through the dreary shower. See, if at all he uses the word bower in the sense that it is a dilapidated building which over the surface of which the weeds are grown, if he uses in that sense, then the reason for growing those plants over that school building is not the shower of rain. Usually we find whenever a wall becomes wet because of the rainfall, because of the leakage, we find the greenery grown over the wall or over the surface of that place. Now here he says the learning bower also is worn out not by the shower of rain, but because of the dreary shower. What does it mean? Dreary shower here stands for the dull or disinterested, as for the boy, the lectures of the teachers given in the school. So he compares the teaching in the formal schools as a dreary shower, as a bore or boring or dull or pale lectures with no practical use at all. So that way he uses that word, that is dreary shower, for the lecture. Then he gives the images to compare his state. He is not satisfied by just giving an outburst to his feeling. Now he compares his state to a bird which is caged. So in the next stanza he says, how can the bird that is born for joy sit in a cage and sing? How can a child when fears annoy but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? So he comes to the main point now. So he says, a caged bird can never sing, because the birds are born to enjoy life, and they enjoy life by moving from one place to other place, by flying from one place to other place. They feel joy and they express their joy through their singing. Now the same bird, if it is put in a cage, then it will not be able to enjoy the life. In that case, it will not be able to sing. If at all you have studied a poem, The Dove by John Keats, then you may realize the state of a caged bird. So in that poem we find the poet, he brings home a sweet dove. he brings it up with utmost care and concern by feeding it the choicest things. But in spite of so much of love given by the poet, or in spite of so many choicest things the poet offers to the bird dies one day in the cage. And then poet realizes that I failed to give it the thing which is most required for a bird for survival, and that is freedom. So in the lack of freedom, the bird has sacrificed its life, the poet realizes later. So here the poet compares his state to a caged bird and says that a caged bird can never enjoy life, it can never be able to sing. So in the same way, myself, when made a captive in the classroom, so I will not be able to enjoy the life. Not just me, any kids, when they are forced into the classrooms, when they are captivated in the classroom, they will not be able to enjoy their childhood. And when they fail to enjoy their childhood, their talents, their inner elements, or the inner spirit cannot grow fully. So as such, even their youth will be obstructed. They will not have a full growth in their youth. So this is the state of us, the school children. So is that school really necessary, which kills our childhood, which does not allow us to grow, or which obstructs our growth in the youth? So such a school is to be avoided, or I must be spared from such a school, the boy feels. How can a child, when fears annoy, when the anxieties of the school irritate a child, droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? So in such a case, the child can only droop its tender wing and forget the spirit, forget the enthusiasm of growing, and in that case the child will not be able to grow to the full maturity in the youth period. Going further, the poet makes an appeal to his parents. So he requests his father and mother, "Oh father and mother, if buds are nipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care's dismay, how shall the summer arise in joy, or the summer fruits appear?" So one more image, one more comparison he gives. See, we plant the different saplings, we grow the plants. The plant is growing naturally by receiving all the nutrients provided by us. Now in the middle of their growth, if we try to the pluck the buds, or if the blossoms which are in the full bloom, if they are blown away by the harsh wind, or if we try to strip the plants, if we try to disturb a plant growth by removing the barks of a plant. So if we hurt the plant like this, by hurting the plant, by stripping it off, or by driving away its blossoms, or by plucking the buds when they are in the stage of growth. So if we do like this in the spring season, in the growing season, in the early stage, then how can we have the full mature fruits or the flowers in the summer season? We will not be able to have, or there will not be any fruits in the trees if the plants were hurt in that initial stage of their growth. ಬೆಳೆಯುವ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಗಿಡಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ತೊಂದರೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ, ಮೊಕ್ಕುಗಳನ್ನು ಚಿವುಟಿದ್ರೆ, ಆ ಹೂಗಳನ್ನು ಉದುರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಆ ಬೆಳೀತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಗಿಡದ ತೊಗಟೆಗಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಹಿಂಸೆ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ, ಆ ಗಿಡ ಏನಾಗ್ತದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಂಪೂರ್ಣವಾಗಿ ಬೆಳಿಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿ ಏಬಲ್ ಟು ಗ್ರೋ, ಅಂಡ್ ಇನ್ ದಟ್ ಕೇಸ್ ವಿ ವಿಲ್ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿ ಏಬಲ್ ಟು ಗೆಟ್ ದ fruits or the fully grown flowers, whatever it is, in the summer season. So in the same way, if the children are obstructed in their initial stage of their growth, that is the spring in the child's life refers to, or the man's life refer to the childhood. So if the children are hurt or obstructed like this in the childhood, how can they have a fully developed or mature youth? So there will not be fully grown youth. So in the sense the growth in the youth also will be stunted, will be obstructed. So don't allow this to happen. So he makes request to his parents by using the metaphor of human cycle, human growth cycle, as well as the nature cycle. So the spring in the nature is compared to man's childhood. Likewise, the summer in the nature is compared to man's youth, and the winter period or the autumn season, when the total nature will be dry. So that is compared to the old age of man's life. So in the last two lines, the poet asks his parents, or how shall we gather what grapes destroy, or bless the mellowing year when the blasts of winter appear? If there are no fruits, if there are no flowers, then what can we preserve for the autumn season when the whole nature will be dry, when nothing will be available in the nature? It is the yield of the summer season we preserve for autumn. But if the spring is disturbed, there will not be fruitful summer. In that case, even the autumn will also be the disturbed. So here the mellowing year refers to autumn season or the winter season, when the nature is fully dry, it can't offer you anything. So the things that we have collected in the summer are preserved for the autumn. So now the schoolboy asks his parents, so what can we have in the winter season? What can we have in the autumn season? Now coming to his own life, he says, if our childhood is destroyed, if we are not allowed to enjoy the beauties of the childhood, then we will not be able to grow to full spirits in the youth. Now, like this, in this way, if the schools destroys both the childhood as well as the youth, what can we preserve for our old age? Old age naturally, usually is an age of pain, and a man forgets the pains of old age by recalling his memories of childhood or youth. Now that after attending the school, we have destroyed our childhood, we have destroyed our youth, then what can we preserve for our old age, when the life will be filled with pain? So there will be nothing left with us. So he makes a request to the parents to save us from this torture of going to school. Here the poem ends. Now the question to you, the students, very genuine question. One question has already come to your mind now. That is, now we are at the threshold of a new course, and this is only the second unit in the text. So in that case, why the textbook committee has made an attempt to distract us from the formal schooling? If we are not to receive the formal schooling, if formal schooling is so bad as to destroy our childhood and our youth, then why we are put inside this classroom and we are made to sit here and study for hours together? Then what is the purpose? What is the purpose in including this poem in your syllabus? So it is not to distract you. Remember, the purpose maybe in including this poem in your syllabus is that it is a lesson, it is a message to the teachers, it is a message to the parents, that don't insist the children on the classes, on the study, on the curriculum or all such activities too much. So let there be little relief, because the children are not the robots. So they are the human beings with heart and feelings. So let them have some enjoyment, because change of work is also a rest, we say. So we often say, and all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So maybe the intention is that, so in between your classes, let there be little relief, let there be importance for sports, let there be some importance for games, let there be some cultural activities, let there be some picnic and other such thing other than the classroom activities, because we, the adults, teachers as well as parents, make a very huge blunder of insisting the children or exposing them to the classes regularly non-stop. Even if you study for 10 to 12 hours, and if you still have some more time, then what your parents or your teachers expect you is you can go for some more exercises in any subject of your interest. So that is what they expect, and this is not to be done. This is the one message. And second message to you kids, to you children, is that formal education is one of the means to get trained or to make you independent in your life, but that is not the only choice. There are so many other sectors, there are so many other options open in the world where you can shine. So there is ample scope for other sectors also. So if suppose you are weak in the subject, don't bother, try your best and come through the exam or pass this exam, because for any of the courses, for any of the jobs, or for any license, permission, anything, nowadays SSLC or PUC is a compulsory thing. So try your best and get through this examination, that's all. And afterwards you can divert your interest on those sectors which are your passion, and you can shine there also. Now I gave you the example of this William Blake, who has received just the education till the age of 10 years. Afterwards he never went to the school. Then what he did? He established himself as a painter, as an engraver, and he became so famous that even today if you go to London, if you visit the museums there, art galleries there, you can find the engravings, the paintings done by William Blake. So even without any formal education also, he could excel in his life. So I can give you thousands of such examples wherein we come across many such talented students. See, during my 23 or 24 years of teaching in the college, okay, I have come across so many students, they are so dull and dumb in the classroom, but the same students, when I see them on the playgrounds, I feel ashamed of myself for scolding them, for accusing them in the classroom. They are so good at games, they are so good at sports, they are so good at painting, the drawings, or maybe the girls, they are so good at tailoring or handicrafts, so all such things. So when you know what your passion is, you try to trace it and try to develop it in your life, which can be the way of survival also for your future life. So there is no need to be panic if you are weak in the formal education. That is what the poet wants to convey here, and he is not against the formal education, or the intention of inserting this poem in your textbook is not to distract you from the formal education, but only an attempt to make you or to convince you that there are other options which you can choose after the completion of your the elementary formal education, maybe SSLC or maybe PUC. That is what the poet wants to, or the members of the textbook committee intend to convey you. So this is what is. Then one more thing, the new education policy, which is accepted by the central government recently and which is being implemented by a number of states these days. So there is a ray of hope for all those students who are not interested in the formal schooling. So in the early stage, maybe it begins from the tracing of the talents or such your abilities. It begins quite early at the age of in the 6th standard, and by the time you reach the high school, your interest, your passion will be fully recognized, and you will be diverted in that particular sector by the new education policy if it is implemented successfully practically. So let us hope for the success of the policy, so that those students who are not interested in the formal education, let them go and choose the field of their choice, or the field where they have the passion. I hope by now you have got what the poet wanted to say here in this poem, The Schoolboy, through the voice of the little boy, the boy who hates to go to school. And I don't say anything about the writing of question answers, which I have already narrated you in my last session. So thank you all the students who are attentively making use of this videos, this online lessons. And also I thank our district principals union as well as our DDPU sir for taking such a very productive initiative to meet the needs of our students who are at home. Thank you.